We begin in Madame Garsa's sanctuary, which is now a blackened husk following the explosion caused by the pykes. Mando reveals that the people of Freetown will join in exchange for getting rid of the spice trade. Fennec protests as this would mean missing out on a lot of credits, but Boba agrees.
Spice is killing our people.
And this scene is very much reminiscent of the scene in Godfather during the meeting of the five families when Don Corloene rejects the idea of getting into the drug business.
Because I believe this drug business is going to destroy us in the years to come.
We then cut to Cad Bane and Mos Eisley paying a visit to the Pykes, and it's revealed that Mok Shaiz, the mayor of Mos Espa, is still in town, and not off-world as previously suggested. It is also then revealed that the Tuskens were killed by the Pykes and not the Nikto bike gang, something that Cad Bane will attempt to use against Boba later. We then see Luke's X-Wing fly into Mos Eisley with R2 piloting the ship, and R2 lands the ship in Peli Motto's workshop. Peli Motto initially mistakes the X-Wing for a New Republic pilot, but she and alongside everyone else is pleasantly surprised when Grogu appears, letting us know that he has decided to go back with Mando. R5 also makes another appearance again, and Grogu eats some gross-looking slugs. Fennec then explains that they have split Boba's forces all across town to cover all their flanks, while they wait for reinforcements from Freetown. And while Fennec claims this,
all our flanks are covered. Nobody is sneaking up on us.
Cad Bane somehow manages to sneak up on them, and this scene is very much reminiscent of their last meeting in the Clone Wars, and judging by Boba's reaction to Cad Bane, it actually tells us that he is aware Cad Bane survived their previous encounter. Then Cad Bane says this,
"If that's not the quack to calling the stifling slimy."
A callback to when Boba himself used the same line in The Mandalorian.
Well, if that isn't the quack to calling the stifling slimy.
Cad Bane reveals that Marshal Vanth won't be coming anytime soon, and states,
"I paid Marshal Vanth a visit. You should have never left him without his armor."
Again, another callback to when Vanth possessed Boba's armor in Season 2 of The Mandalorian. Cad Bane then tries to bait Boba by bringing up the Tusken massacre, and the bait nearly works, but Fennec is able to restrain him. Cad Bane then states,
"You're going soft in your old age."
Recognizing that Boba is no longer the same ruthless bounty hunter he once knew, to which Boba responds with,
"We all do."
Demonstrating that even he recognizes the change within him. But just as the tensions are about to be lowered, everything is taken up a notch when the Aqualish ambush the mods. And in a scene very reminiscent of mob films, Boba's forces are ambushed all over Mos Espa. The Gomorreans are the first to fall, and Fennec is sent to assassinate the Pike leadership in Mos Eisley. On her way, she rescues the mods and tells them to regroup with Boba. Mando and Boba have a moment to build their relationship, and this is most likely done to set up potential allies for Mando in the future conflicts to come as we head into Season 3 of The Mandalorian. The former aide of the mayor interjects this moment, briefly mentioning that he studied negotiation on Coruscant.
"I was educated on Coruscant. Not that that makes me better in any way. I specialized in civic council negotiations."
Coruscant is of course the capital of the Republic, and one of the few planets located at the core of the galaxy. Given its metropolitan nature, it was also home to many centers of education, including the military academies of the Empire. Mando and Boba use the Twi'lek as bait,
But for this tablet bearing the terms of surrender.
And as the aide reads out Boba's statement, we get a surprisingly eloquent declaration from a former bounty hunter.
"The arid sands of Tatooine will once again flourish with flowered fields fertilized with the bodies of your dead."
I guess Jango Fett really didn't skip that part of Boba's education. Boba and Mando fly out on their jetpacks and surprise the Pykes, very reminiscent of the way the Mandalorians flew in to save Mando back in Season 1. We see Boba's knee rocket back in action again, which we last saw in The Mandalorian. Mando pulls out his whistling birds, and not to be outdone, Boba uses his wrist rockets. And as the fight continues, there were definitely moments which were very reminiscent of how gangster films depict gunfights. But as the two are about to be overwhelmed, the people of Freetown arrive in what looks to be a modified armor speeder with the bartender as the primary gunner. Mando and the bartender have a moment, and if you notice carefully, each time the bartender fires his gun, there is a slightly different sound.
Yes, we did.
And that's because the gun that the bartender is using is a cycler rifle, one that is very commonly used by the Tuskens. And they even brought back the same sound design for the rifle that they used in the Phantom Menace during the pod racing scene where the Tuskens were shooting at the racers. The cycler rifle makes a different sound to regular blasters because they fire solid projectiles at incredibly high velocity, and when hit, they are capable of tearing off limbs. Then the mods show up on their really slow moving scooters, and one of them nearly gets taken out. Krrsantan also makes a return, and one can only wonder what happened to the Trandoshans he faced off against. But it's pretty clear that the Wookiee is badly injured, and we even see several lasers hit the armor on the Wookiee, and one eventually finds its mark. And as Boba pulls Krrsantan behind the speeder, you can actually notice a wound on the Wookiee's head, almost like a slash wound inflicted by the Trandoshans. Boba's crew is able to regroup and the Pykes retreat temporarily, but just as we are able to catch a breath, the Pykes send these robot walkers with a sort of red dot in the middle as an eye, kinda reminiscent of HAL 9000 from the 2001 Space Odyssey. The droids then activate an energy field, a very common piece of equipment in Star Wars, and the droids are very much reminiscent of the droidekas used during the Clone Wars, as they too had energy shields around them that would deploy as they entered combat. Boba attempts to use his rockets, but they hardly leave a mark. Mando tries to get through with his lightsaber, but even that doesn't work. Boba then flies off for more reinforcements, while Mando is left to distract the droids. Mando manages to distract one while the other continues to chase the rest of the crew. Krrsantan attempts to stop the droid, and for a moment, he almost makes it through. And you can even see the droid's shield change color, the same change that happens later when the droids fight the Rancor. And the reason why he's able to get through this is because, besides having the strength of a Wookiee, his hands are actually modified with electrical brass knuckles, perhaps giving him that extra power to push through. But none of it matters anyways, as he is knocked back. Peli Motto shows up with her crew of droids and being towed by one of the droids that we have seen in Mos Espa in a previous episode pulling 2 Biffs. Then we finally get a heartfelt reunion between Grogu and Mando, which definitely didn't bring tears to my eyes. Mando sees that Grogu is wearing the Beskar armor, but the reunion is interrupted by the droids. And then, like a scene out of Jurassic Park and King Kong, the Rancor arrives, with none other than Boba Fett riding it. And now that we get to see the Rancor in action, it moves surprisingly fast. The Rancor gives the droids a few slaps, and as the droid gets back up to face it, you can see the shield changes color from blue to red, and this is because the energy shield is actually being refocused to the front where the Rancor is, leaving the rear somewhat exposed. This is very similar to how ships in Star Wars are able to increase the shielding from one side to another by redirecting the flow of power. Mando uses the opportunity to slip through with the darksaber, but he doesn't quite manage to kill it entirely. Instead, it's up to Grogu to save Mando's life once again, demonstrating just how much he has learned from Luke in his time away. The Rancor proceeds to go ham on the droid.
Do it.
And that's one droid down and one more to go. As the rest of the crew are pinned down, the Rancor enters the scene and knocks the last droid into a building. The droid is able to return, but now with its shielding offline. We essentially get an epic monster mech battle that the Rancor comes out on top. Then the Rancor eats a pyke, which is again a callback to this scene from the Return of the Jedi. Cad Bane enters the scene again, challenging Boba to a duel, but not before scaring the Rancor with a flamethrower, which causes Boba to fall off and the Rancor to go berserk. Cad Bane then says,
"I've known you a long time, Boba."
Reflecting how the two have had intertwined histories that have lasted from the Clone Wars until now. Cad Bane states that he can't quite figure out what exactly Boba's angle is trying to save the people of Mos Espa. Bane brings up the Tuskens again,
Like the Tuskens.
but Boba understands its bait this time by saying this.
Don't toy with me. I'm I'm not a little boy any longer.
Which again calls back to his time he spent with Cad Bane during the Clone Wars. As the two draw and fire at each other, Cad Bane comes out on top, hitting Boba's right arm in between the armor. And this is actually a neat detail that not only ups the stakes but actually reflects what Cad Bane has learned from their previous encounter, as when they first dueled, Cad Bane aimed for the head, which of course is protected by Boba's helmet, and he in turn received a nasty head wound. So this time Cad Bane aims for a soft spot, learning from his previous mistake. Cad Bane taunts Boba by saying,
You tried to go straight, but you've got your father's blood pumping through your veins.
reflecting how Boba's father Jango was also a bounty hunter. And as Bane prepares to finish Boba off, he says,
Consider this my final lesson.
a callback to when he used to mentor Boba as a kid. But Bane is then surprised by Boba as he uses a gaffy stick, a sweet form of revenge for his fallen tribe. And perhaps the one thing Bane would be unfamiliar with, as he didn't teach Boba this fighting style. So while it makes sense that Bane would be able to read Boba's more conventional moves, he would not be familiar with this one. And so ends the life of one of the galaxy's most notorious bounty hunters. What's really great about this entire fight scene is that beyond the cool factor, it actually symbolizes how Boba has moved on from his bounty hunting past, whereas Cad Bane was still stuck in it. As Fennec mentioned in an earlier episode,
People like us don't get to decide when we're finished.
it's not so easy to leave such a life behind. And Cad Bane, much like Jango Fett, never really moved on, which inevitably led them to their deaths, as there is only one road where this sort of life leads. And so this fight between Cad Bane and Boba really just reflects Boba's character growth, and in my opinion, the reason why he wins this fight beyond the surprise factor is that Boba has something worth fighting for, using the weapon he received from his adopted people to kill Bane. So as you can see in Star Wars, it's all about family. But is Cad Bane really dead? Well, more on that in another video. The Rancor goes on a rampage, giving us scenes that mirror King Kong in New York. Mando is almost eaten by the Rancor, but is saved by his armor once again. Grogu steps in and puts the beast to sleep, before he too falls asleep next to it, exhausted by all this effort, giving us another cute Grogu scene. Fennec absolutely slaughters everyone in a scene that reminds us that she is a master assassin. Mos Espa rebuilds under Boba Fett's leadership, and unlike the first time they walk through its streets, people now pay respects to the daimyo of the city. A few kids give Boba a Meiluran, and we see Grogu and Mando fly off into space. Then in a mid-credit scene, we see Cobb Vanth inside a Bacta tank, and we see that he is about to be operated on by the mod surgeon that we saw in an earlier episode, kinda reminiscent to how Fennec was saved by Boba. So that's it for the Book of Boba Fett. What a smashing finale. I was really happy with what we got, and all I have to say is give me Mandalorian Season 3 now. Anyways, that's all for this breakdown. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you in the next one. I am the Lost Acolyte,
And I have spoken.